The message arrived during the night cycle of the starship Thunder. Commander James Stone stared at the screen, his weathered face illuminated by its harsh glow. Another human colony had fallen. New Denver, population 40,000, now nothing but ashes and broken dreams. The collective had struck again, their ships descending from orbit like gleaming angels of death. Stone's fist clenched as he remembered the first contact 5 years ago. The aliens had appeared above Earth with their shining ships and advanced technology, looking down at humanity like adults watching children play with toys. They hadn't expected much from the creatures who evolved on such a harsh world, a planet with crushing gravity, extreme weather, and countless predators. Humans were, in their eyes, nothing but primitive brutes who had somehow stumbled into space. That mistake had cost both sides dearly. The war started 3 years ago, when the collective denied humanity's petition to join as equals. Species from Deathworlds lacked the refinement for galactic society, they had said. Their diplomats, tall willowy beings with delicate features, had looked down their long snouts at the human representatives. They offered humanity a place, as a protectorate, a servant race to be guided by their betters. Stone remembered the insults clearly. He had been there, standing guard during those final talks. The aliens had called humans brutish, aggressive, and unsuited for civilization. They didn't understand that these very traits had helped humanity survive on Earth. Every human carried the legacy of countless generations who had outrun, outfought, and outsmarted the deadliest predators their world could throw at them. Looking at the casualty reports from New Denver, Stone felt something change inside him. The previous defensive strategies weren't working. The collective's ships were faster, their weapons more advanced. But they had a weakness, one that came from their own evolution. "Computer, show me the biological data on the 5 main collective species," he ordered. The screen filled with images of alien beings. All of them, he noticed, shared similar features: large eyes set wide apart, quick nervous movements, heightened hearing. The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. They were all prey animals. Every dominant species in the collective had evolved from creatures that ran and hid from predators. Their ancestors had survived by being cautious, by running away, by staying in large groups where there was safety in numbers. Even after millions of years of civilization, those instincts remained buried in their genes. Stone pulled up more data, his eyes scanning through evolution charts and behavioral studies. The collected ships always attacked in large groups. They retreated at the first sign of serious resistance. Their colonies were built like warrens, with countless escape routes and hiding places. Everything about them screamed prey to Stone's predator brain. A plan began to form in his mind. Not a conventional military strategy, but something older. Something that reached back to humanity's days as hunters on the African savanna. If the collective wanted to treat humans like primitive creatures, then perhaps it was time to show them just how dangerous primitive creatures could be. Stone typed out a message to Fleet Command. Request permission to form Special Operations Unit for unconventional warfare. The response came within minutes, a simple granted. They were desperate enough to try anything now. Next, he began searching personnel files. He needed specific people, those who came from Earth's harshest environments. People who understood in their bones what it meant to be a predator. People who could think like the hunters their ancestors had been. As he worked, Stone glanced at the memorial wall of his cabin. Photos of destroyed colonies hung there. Mars Base 1, New Auckland, Titan Station, and now New Denver. The collective thought they were teaching humanity a lesson in humility. Instead, they were about to learn why every advanced species should fear predators, especially those predators who had learned to think. "Computer, send alert to selected personnel," Stone commanded. "Mission briefing in 6 hours." He looked once more at the image of New Denver's ruins. The collective had wanted to show humanity its place in the galaxy. They would soon learn that humanity's place was not at the bottom of their hierarchy, but at the top of the food chain where every predator species belonged. The hunt was about to begin. The briefing room on the Thunder was dark except for the glow of holographic displays. 3 people sat before Stone, each one chosen for their unique background. They were the best humanity had to offer, though not in the way most would expect. Mark leaned back in his chair, his sun-weathered face showing little emotion. He had spent 15 years tracking dangerous animals through the Australian outback before joining the military. His sniper records were unmatched because he understood something most didn't. Patience was a predator's greatest weapon. Next to him sat Rose, her thick arms crossed over her chest. She had grown up in the harshest parts of Alaska, learning to survive in temperatures that would kill most humans in hours. The collective's ships had destroyed her home colony, but she hadn't let grief break her. Instead, it had made her more dangerous. The third member was Alan, who looked the least impressive, but might be the deadliest of all. He had lived in Death Valley, running survival courses in one of Earth's most hostile environments. His understanding of technology came from learning to defeat it, finding ways to survive when everything around him was trying to kill them. The collective thinks we're animals, Stone began, bringing up images of destroyed human colonies. They're right. We are animals, Earth's apex predators, and it's time we started acting like it. The room's screens filled with biological data about the collected species. Look at their eyes, Stone pointed out. Wide set, like prey animals. They can see danger coming from almost any direction. Their hearing is twice as sensitive as ours, evolved to detect predators before they attack. Even their ships are built around these instincts. They always travel in groups, always maintain escape routes. Mark nodded slowly, beginning to understand. You want to hunt them. Not just hunt them, Stone replied. I want to make them remember what it feels like to be prey. Their species spent millions of years running from predators before they developed technology. Those instincts are still there, buried under all their advanced science. Rose leaned forward, her eyes bright with interest. Like how horses still spook at sudden movements, no matter how well trained they are. Exactly. Stone brought up a new display showing collective military formations. They're powerful because they stay together, but that's also their weakness. Prey animals panic when they're separated from the herd. We're going to use that. Alan studied the technical readouts of collective ships. Their technology is built around their instincts too. Multiple escape pods, redundant systems, automated distress calls. Everything designed to run and hide. He smiled slightly. We can work with that. Stone laid out his plan. They would not face the collective's superior numbers and technology directly. Instead, they would become the monsters that haunted their evolutionary memories. Each team member would bring their survival skills to create a nightmare the collective couldn't fight because it was encoded in their very DNA. Mark, you'll be our stalker, Stone assigned. Your job is to pick off stragglers and create the feeling that nowhere is safe. Rose, you'll use your demolitions experience to separate groups from each other. Prey animals are most vulnerable when they're alone. Alan, you'll turn their own technology against them, making their safety systems work for us. The team spent hours studying their targets. They learned how each collective species showed fear, what movements triggered their flight responses, how they behaved when separated from their groups. They weren't preparing for a military campaign. They were preparing for a hunt. Remember, Stone told them as the briefing ended, we're not fighting this war by their rules anymore. We're fighting it by nature's rules. The rules written in their bones and in ours. As his team left to prepare, Stone looked at the star map showing collective territory. Their enemies thought their greatest advantage was their superior technology. They were about to learn that technology wasn't everything. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon was the memory of fear carried in every cell, passed down through countless generations. The predators of Earth were going hunting, and the galaxy would never be the same. The collective's forward base on Moon GL 435 was considered impregnable. Its defenses were state-of-the-art. Its garrison was 1,000 strong, and its shields could withstand a fleet's bombardment. But Stone's team wasn't interested in any of that. They were interested in the darkness. Their small ship landed silently 2 miles from the base, using the planet's magnetic storms as cover. The team stepped out wearing basic environmental suits. The moon's atmosphere was thin but breathable. More importantly, it was dark. The moon's host planet blocked its sun for 18 standard hours out of 24. Remember, Stone's voice came through their comm units. We're not here to destroy the base. We're here to teach them fear. Mark moved first, his dark suit blending with the shadows. He had studied how the collective species' eyes worked. They could see well in low light, but they were extremely sensitive to sudden movement. He positioned himself on a ridge overlooking the base's main entrance. Rose planted her devices next. Not explosives, but something more insidious. Small speakers, carefully hidden, each programmed with specific sounds. The low growl of earth predators, the snap of branches, the rustle of movement in darkness. Sounds that would mean nothing to a human but would trigger deep primal responses in the collective species. Ellen worked on the base's external sensors, not disabling them but subtly altering their sensitivity. They would pick up movement where there was none, detect shadows that didn't exist. The collective's own security systems would help create the illusion of being stalked. Stone gave the signal, and the hunt began. The first sign that something was wrong came when the base's outer patrol failed to report in. They had simply frozen, caught in the open when Mark started his work. He didn't shoot them. He just let them catch glimpses of movement in their peripheral vision, always just at the edge of sight. The patrol broke formation, huddling together like frightened animals. Rose's hidden speakers activated one by one, creating a wave of unsettling sounds that moved across the base's perimeter. The effect was immediate. The collective soldiers' wide-set eyes darted back and forth, their bodies tensing with each new noise. They began to bunch together, instinctively seeking safety in numbers. Inside the base, Alan's modified sensors started triggering alarms. Security screens showed fleeting shadows. Movement sensors detected phantom predators. The base's commander ordered more patrols out to investigate, exactly as planned. Stone's team was forcing them to split their forces. They're responding like herd animals, Mark reported quietly. The outer groups are trying to move back to the main building. They're leaving their posts. Stone watched through his binoculars as discipline began to crack. The collective soldiers were some of the best trained in the galaxy, but training couldn't override millions of years of evolution. Every shadow became a threat. Every sound was a predator. Their technology, usually a source of confidence, now seemed to betray them at every turn. The team stepped up their tactics. Mark left signs of a predator's passage, marks on walls, disturbed soil, things that would mean nothing to a human but screamed danger to the collective species. Rose's speakers began mimicking their own distress calls, making them think their comrades were being hunted in the darkness. By the 6th hour, the base was in chaos. Soldiers refused to leave the main building. Those still outside were paralyzed with fear, their bodies pumping out stress hormones that their companions could smell. The entire base reeked of terror. Stone finally gave the signal to withdraw, but not before leaving one final message. On the base's main gate, they carved the symbol that would become infamous throughout the galaxy. A simple human handprint. Let the collective's leaders dismiss it as primitive. Let them laugh at such a basic mark. The soldiers who had spent the night being hunted would understand its meaning. As their ship lifted off, Stone looked back at the base. Its lights were now blazing, trying to push back the darkness. But his team had achieved their goal. The collective would send investigators, write reports, and try to explain what had happened. But the soldiers there would remember how it felt to be prey. And this was only the beginning. News of the attack spread through the collective's ranks like a virus. Their leaders tried to suppress the reports, but soldiers talked. Stories of being hunted in the darkness traveled from ship to ship, base to base. The humans weren't fighting like a civilized species anymore. They were fighting like the predators they truly were. Stone's team struck 3 more targets in rapid succession. Each attack followed the same pattern, but with new elements added. They studied how their prey reacted and adapted their tactics accordingly. "Look at their supply ships now," Alan said during a mission briefing. He pointed to surveillance footage showing collective cargo vessels. "They're moving in larger convoys, bunching up like scared animals." His fingers danced over the display, highlighting flight patterns. "Their routes are longer because they're avoiding dark spaces between systems." Stone nodded. "Just like prey animals taking the long way around to avoid predator territories." "How are their escort patterns?" Mark pulled up his own data. "They're burning through resources trying to protect everything at once. Their combat ships are spread thin." He smiled slightly. "Perfect for a wolf pack." They launched their next attack on a supply convoy. This time, they'd brought 3 ships instead of 1. Rose had modified their engines to run silent, making them ghost through space like hunting cats. The collective ships never saw them coming. The human vessels struck from different directions, their attack pattern based on how wolves separated prey from a herd. They didn't target the largest ships. Instead, they picked off the smallest, weakest vessels at the edges of the formation. Just as Stone had predicted, the convoy broke apart in panic. "They're running," Rose reported from her ship, "breaking formation exactly like you said they would." "Remember," Stone transmitted to his team, "let some of them escape. Fear spreads faster than plasma fire." The survivors brought stories back to their commanders. Stories of human ships that moved like predators, striking from nowhere and vanishing into the void. The collective's leaders demanded explanations, but their subordinates could only describe the primal terror they had felt. It was like their ancestors were screaming warnings in their heads, trying to save them from creatures that hunted in the dark. Stone's team gave them no time to recover. They struck outposts, patrols, and supply lines. Each attack reinforced the message. Humans weren't just strong because of their heavy gravity world. They were dangerous because they thought like predators. The collective tried to adapt. They increased security, added more escort ships, and improved their sensors. But these measures came from their prey instincts, gathering in larger groups, building better hiding places. They couldn't understand that these actions made Stone's job easier by making their movements more predictable. "Their military discipline is cracking," Allen reported after intercepting collective communications. "Lower-ranking officers are refusing to take outer patrol duties. Some ships are violating protocols to stay closer to their bases." Rose examined the data from their latest raid. "Their reaction times are getting worse too. They're starting to hesitate, second-guessing their training. Fear is winning over their technology." The team gathered in their ship's tactical room, planning their next move. The walls were covered with maps showing collective territory, each mark representing another successful hunt. Their enemies' movements were becoming more restricted, more defensive. The mighty collective was starting to behave like cornered prey. "We're reaching a critical point," Stone told his team. "Their leaders can't ignore this anymore. They'll have to respond with something big to restore confidence." Mark studied the patrol patterns he'd been tracking. "They're planning something. Ship movements suggest they're gathering forces for a major operation." "Good." Stone's eyes gleamed in the dim light of the tactical displays. "Let them gather. Let them bunch up like scared animals in a storm." He pointed to a spot on the map. "That's where we'll show them what real hunting looks like." The team began their preparations. The collective thought they were gathering strength in numbers. They didn't understand that they were doing exactly what Stone wanted, concentrating their forces into one massive target, one that would demonstrate to the entire galaxy why Earth's predators were the most feared in history. The next phase would remind them that the most dangerous predator was one that could think. The collective's Festival of Unity was their most important gathering. Once every cycle, their ships and stations would light up their hulls with brilliant colors, creating rivers of light in space. It was meant to remind their species of the safety they had found in civilization, away from the dark wilds where predators once hunted their ancestors. This cycle's festival was larger than usual. The collective's leadership had ordered maximum participation, hoping the display of unity would calm their increasingly nervous population. Thousands of ships gathered in the Vega sector, forming patterns that could be seen from light years away. Stone watched the gathering through his ship's sensors. "They're trying to make themselves feel safe," he said to his team. "Like prey animals gathering in huge herds during mating season. Makes them a perfect target," Mark noted, checking his modified weapon systems. The team had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying the festival's traditions and the collective's behavioral patterns during religious ceremonies. Rose had adapted their ship's stealth systems to take advantage of the light show. "The festival lights will actually help us," she explained. "Their eyes will be adjusted to the brightness. They won't see us coming from the dark spaces between their formations." Alan's work had been the most crucial. He had found a way to hack into the festival's ceremonial broadcast network. "Every ship and station will be connected," he said. "When we strike, they'll all see it. More importantly, they'll all feel it." The team split up, each ship taking position around the gathering. They waited as the festival reached its peak, when the collective ships formed a massive spiral of light, a symbol of their unity and civilization. Stone gave the signal. The attack began not with weapons, but with darkness. Rose's ships struck first, using electromagnetic pulses to create expanding circles of blackness in the festival lights. The collective ships in those areas panicked, their crews experiencing the primal terror of suddenly being plunged into darkness. Mark's targeting systems picked off the emergency lights next, creating patches of absolute darkness that spread through the formation like ink in water. In the black zones, collective crews began picking up strange readings on their sensors, phantom signals that Alan had crafted to mimic ancient predator movements. The fear spread faster than light. Ships began breaking formation, their crews falling back on instincts older than their civilization. Some tried to run, others clustered together in tight groups. The magnificent spiral pattern collapsed into chaos. Stone's voice transmitted across all frequencies. "You fear the dark because your ancestors knew what hunted there. Today, you remember why." The team's ships moved through the darkness like sharks through water, their hulls painted with light-absorbing materials that made them seem like moving pieces of void. They didn't fire their weapons. They didn't need to. The panic was doing their work for them. Collective ships collided with each other in their desperation to escape. Emergency broadcasts filled the channels, crews reporting shadows that couldn't exist in space, movements that triggered genetic memories of being hunted. The Festival of Unity had become a demonstration of primal terror. In the command center of his ship, Stone watched the chaos spread. Close-up video feeds showed collective crew members pressing against each other, their wide eyes darting at shadows, their bodies trembling with instincts they couldn't control. Even their leaders were affected, their voices shaking as they tried to restore order. "Send the message," Stone ordered. Alan activated his final program. On every screen and display in the collective fleet, the same image appeared, a simple animation of a human shadow walking towards the viewer. Basic, primitive, terrifying. The collective crews watched, paralyzed, as their worst nightmare approached them through their own communication systems. The entire operation lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the festival was in ruins, but casualties were minimal. Stone's team had achieved their real goal, showing the entire collective all at once that their technology couldn't save them from their fears. As they withdrew, Stone looked back at the scattered remains of the festival. The collective's leadership would try to explain this away, to restore confidence with speeches and displays of power. But every crew member who had been there would remember the truth. Civilization was a thin veneer over basic instincts, and humans knew how to peel that veneer away. The collective's central government complex floated in space like a glittering jewel. Its 6 massive rings spun around a central sphere, housing the leaders who had started this war. After the festival disaster, they had retreated here, surrounding themselves with their strongest ships and best soldiers. Stone watched the complex through his ship's view screen. The collective had tripled their usual defenses, but their formation told him everything he needed to know. Their ships had clustered too close together, like frightened animals seeking safety in numbers. "They're scared," Mark said, studying the sensor readings. "Look at their patrol patterns. They're so focused on watching the darkness between stars that they're leaving gaps in their inner defense." Rose had finished modifying their ship's engines for the final push. "The fear is working against them now. They're burning fuel, keeping their lights at maximum. Their energy reserves must be stretching thin." Alan's fingers moved across his console, probing the complex's defenses. "Their communication channels are flooded with status reports and position checks. They're so afraid of being isolated that they're overwhelming their own networks." Stone gathered his team for the final briefing. The plan was simple but needed perfect timing. They had studied how prey animals behaved when cornered, how they would sometimes freeze instead of run, how their panic could be used to guide them. The attack began with silence. Complete silence. Alan shut down all communication channels around the complex. No signals could get in or out. The collective ships and stations suddenly found themselves deaf and blind, cut off from the constant stream of reassuring contact they relied on. The effect was immediate. Ships began breaking formation, trying to move closer to each other. Their tight defensive patterns started to unravel. Just as Stone had predicted, their prey instincts were stronger than their military training. Rose's modified ships moved in next. They didn't attack. They simply appeared and disappeared at the edge of sensor range, like predators testing their prey's defenses. The collective ships reacted exactly as expected, pulling back to protect their leaders in the central sphere. "They're bunching up too tight," Mark reported, "just like animals trying to put their young in the center of the herd." His targeting computer highlighted the gaps this movement had created in their formation. Stone's ship slipped through one of these gaps, followed by the others. They moved like shadows through the complex's rings, letting the collective catch glimpses of them, but never offering a clear target. The defending ships fired blindly into space, their crews jumping at every shadow. Inside the central sphere, the collective's leaders were gathering in their grand assembly hall. Stone had studied the architectural plans. Like everything else about the collective, the hall was designed around prey instincts, multiple exits, clear lines of sight, elevated positions for watching approach vectors. The team's ships docked simultaneously at different points around the sphere. They didn't need to fight their way in. The internal security forces were too busy responding to phantom alerts Alan had created throughout the station. The few guards they encountered fled at the sight of them, their bodies overcome by instinctive terror of approaching predators. Stone walked alone into the assembly hall. The collective leaders stared at him with their wide, prey species eyes. Some tried to run. Others froze in place. Their finest warriors, the products of millions of years of civilization, reduced to frightened animals by the approach of a single human. "You started this war," Stone said, his voice carrying across the silent hall, "because you thought humans were too primitive to be your equals. Because we came from a world that you considered too harsh for civilized life." He took another step forward, and the entire assembly flinched. "But you never understood what that harsh world created. You saw our strength and endurance, but those weren't what made us dangerous." Another step. What made us dangerous was learning to think like predators while building a civilization. The collective's supreme leader, a tall figure with quadruple eyes, finally found the courage to speak. "What do you want?" Stone stopped in the center of the hall. "The same thing we wanted at the beginning. Peace between equals. But now you understand what that means. It means accepting that the galaxy is big enough for both predator and prey species, as long as each respects the other's nature." He reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out a data chip. The assembled leaders tensed, then relaxed as they recognized the universal symbol for peace terms. Stone placed it on the central podium. "Your choice is simple," he said. "Accept these terms, or we continue the hunt. And remember, humans aren't just pursuit predators. We're patient ones." 3 months after the confrontation at the central complex, Stone stood at a window aboard the Thunder, watching ships move through space. Collective vessels now flew alongside human ones, their crews learning to work together. The peace terms had been accepted with a speed that surprised everyone except his team. "They're still nervous around us," Mark said, joining him at the window. "Did you see how their dock workers jumped when Rose laughed earlier?" There was no mockery in his voice, just observation. Stone nodded. The collective species were adapting, but slowly. Their instincts couldn't be changed overnight. But something else had changed, the way they viewed those instincts. Instead of seeing their cautious nature as a sign of civilization, they had learned to respect it as a survival trait, just as humans had learned to respect their own predatory instincts. Alan appeared with his data pad showing the latest reports. The collective had begun incorporating human advisors into their security forces, learning to think like predators when needed. In return, humans were learning the value of the collective's cautious approach to space exploration. Both sides were becoming stronger by understanding each other. The casualty reports from the entire campaign just came in, Rose said, joining them. "We achieved what we wanted." Total military deaths on both sides were lower than a single day of conventional warfare. That had been Stone's real victory. His team's use of psychological warfare hadn't just won the war. It had won it while preserving lives on both sides. The collective's leaders had expected humans to be brutally violent. Instead, they had shown that true predators didn't need to kill when fear would work better. A delegation of collective diplomats passed through the corridor, their movements still twitchy when they saw humans, but no longer paralyzed with terror. They had learned that humans could control their predatory nature, choosing when to be hunters and when to be partners. "Did you see the new trade agreements?" Alan asked. "They're already talking about joint colonies. Turns out our instincts complement each other perfectly. Their caution balances our aggression. Their planning matches our innovation." Stone smiled slightly. The galaxy was learning what Earth's history had shown long ago, that predator and prey species could coexist, even thrive together. Humans' dogs had once been wolves. Now they were humanity's closest companions. The same principle was working on a galactic scale. The team gathered in Stone's office for their final meeting. Their special unit was being reformed into a training group, teaching both human and collective forces how to understand and respect their different natures. The hunting was over, but the learning was just beginning. "The collective's younger members are the most interesting," Rose noted. "They're fascinated by humans now. Their schools are full of questions about Earth's predators. They want to understand how we think." Mark checked his messages. Some of their military officers have even requested survival training on Earth. They want to face their fears, learn to think like we do. He shook his head in amazement. A month ago, they wouldn't go near a Deathworld. Through the office window, they could see Earth rising over the station's horizon. The collective had a new name for it now. They called it the Predator's Cradle. But it wasn't a term of fear anymore. It was a term of respect, an acknowledgement that humanity's harsh homeworld had forged them into something unique in the galaxy. Predators who could think, plan, and show mercy. Stone looked at his team. "We showed them something they never expected. That being primitive, as they called us, wasn't a weakness. All those millions of years of evolution, all those instincts they tried to suppress, were just tools. Tools that could be used for war or peace." The lights of ships moving through space cast shifting shadows in the office. Once, those shadows would have triggered panic in collective crews. Now they were just part of the tapestry of space travel, a reminder that the darkness between stars held wonders as well as fears. "The best hunts," Stone said quietly, "are the ones that end not with a kill, but with understanding." He looked at the activity in space, at the mixed crews learning to work together, at the future taking shape before them. And sometimes, the most ruthless tactic of all is showing mercy when your enemy expects none.